Thanks for joining us. In Colossians 3, it says, "Since you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above. Your life is now hidden with Christ in God." Your life is hidden with Christ. Your life is safe. It is all covered, wrapped up in what Christ has done for you. This is not only a future hope, but an accomplished truth right now. Colossians 3:16 proclaims, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God." This verse is amazing. Let the word of Christ, that phrase, is only used here in Colossians. Other places, it's word of Christ, instead of word of Christ, it's word of the Lord or word of God. Each born-again one has the Spirit of Christ within, and yet each of us is being strongly encouraged to let the word of Christ dwell in us. This has to be done very intentionally. You have to put on the words of Christ and let them into your life and become your life. We have to let Christ live within us by letting the word of Christ dwell in us. We have to let the word of Christ not only have entrance into our lives, but to dwell, to take up residence, to live in a fixed place, to keep house, to be settled into the home of our heart. It is not just reading the Bible and then forgetting about it an hour later. It is not just knowing the words of Christ, but letting them settle in and be living and real in you. We want the word of Christ living in us, dwelling in us, hiding it deeply and displaying it proudly in every room of our heart. We should live in the word of Christ like we live in our homes. We are familiar with our home, where the closets are, what's in the closet, what is in each drawer. We must thoroughly acquaint ourselves with the Word. The Word should become so familiar to us that we know it like the back of our hand. The idea is to let the Word of Christ dwell inside and live at home in our lives. It is not enough to hear or read the Word or even to know it well. We must also put it into practice, to live it. How easy it is to read the Bible and not think about how to live differently. How easy it is to talk about what a verse means and not live out what the verse is saying. We need to live it, dwell and settle in with the Word of Christ being what our life and our home is built on. The Word of Christ is to dwell in you richly, abundantly, not sparsely. Is the Word of Christ just an occasional visitor or a permanent resident in your life? Is the Word of Christ dwelling in you richly? This verse lists 3 specific ways of Christ's Word dwelling in the life of a believer. The first 2 are listed together: teaching and admonishing. Christ's Word can instruct us. At the same time, Christ's Word can also give us guidance in how to correct mistakes in what we believe and what we do, so that we can align our lives with Christ. Third, we are encouraged to sing various types of spiritual songs to let the Word of Christ dwell richly within us. Putting a verse in song is such a great way to let the Word of Christ live in you. Letting the Word of Christ dwell richly in you by teaching, admonishing, and singing are all to be done with thankfulness in your heart. We have so much to be thankful for because of what Christ has done for us and the new life that we have been given, all because of Christ. Are you letting the Word of Christ dwell in you? Is it dwelling in you richly or sparsely? Let me encourage you today to make the Word of Christ a priority, to dwell in you richly? Have you given the Word of Christ the kind of attention it deserves, or have you ignored it? Does the Word of Christ feel at home in your life, or does it feel unwanted? God is beseeching us to give the Word of Christ such a grand, welcoming reception that it literally feels at home in us and therefore comes to take up permanent residency. Does the Word have this kind of place in your life? Does it really dwell in you richly? Does it feel at home and comfortable in your life? Or is the Word of Christ a visitor that is occasionally welcomed into your life? We must allow the Word of Christ to live in us and be at home in our heart and mind. God bless you, and thanks for listening.